Hello, welcome back. This is ProTailDev. This is everything to do with the Game Jam Harvest Spring, and this is about the second day, everything that I did in the second day. Let's get straight into it. I don't want to waste any time. Okay, so the first thing I did was I went into Blender and I decided to make a few trees because I really wasn't very happy with the first day's, the end of the first day's session with the trees and the landscape. I wasn't very happy with that, and I was unsure about how to go about doing the terrain and what style I wanted. So in the end, I decided to go into Blender and do something completely different, something I've not done before, which is low poly models. I've done models in the past, but I've never really focused a game around it, is what I meant. I have done low poly models before, but I've never really meant them for a game, so that's what I decided to do. So as you see, I've gone into Blender, which is obviously free, and then I can make some very low poly models very quickly. As you can see, I'm just scaling things. I obviously used the modifier to add a skin, and then combined all the vertices, and extruded them all up. I've extruded different faces, and then I obviously, when I put the skin on, it skinned it automatically and I just scaled them differently. So I'm going to probably be quiet for most of this because I don't really see the point in explaining everything I did in Blender, because things are pretty straightforward in Blender. If you don't really know much about it, I suppose it should be very straightforward to follow. So as you can see, all I've done is create a few little spheres that are low poly, and then obviously the tree's already low poly based on what I specified the size. I do a little bit of skipping, and I try and get through Blender as quickly as possible, because really when the most of the work for the second day was in Unity, so it will be a period where I skip to Unity. So I basically make 4 trees and a plant, which is the seedling, just to try and match what I did yesterday with the different stages. So as you can see, I'm creating a second tree now, and then I'll skip ahead into when I get to the seedling, because with the seedling I also added like leaves on it, and it was done a little tiny bit differently with the leaves. As you can see here, this is the final plant that I did, which was the seedling. I'm just basically creating a leaf, which is just using a plane. Then I'll add some edge loops, which I can't remember if that's what they're called in this. I'm still very much familiar with Maya, since that's what I did in my course. But it's very similar. Just create some edges, some lines, and then basically shape them. Very, very straightforward. And then what I'll do is I'll show an overhead view in the shading, just to show me colouring and putting the materials on for all of the different plants. So you'll see that in a second. So here we go, this is all the plants I did. So there's, like I said, 5 plants in total. There was the sapling, the old sapling, the young tree, and the adult. And then obviously the seedling in the centre. So here you go, I'm just changing the materials and adding a few different shadings in of these different colours. And you can see the different shapes, and I've tried my best to keep the size relative to the same length, just so it's easier in Unity. So here we go, this is all of the 5 plants. You can see the little seedling here with this green stem, and you can see all of the different plants that I've done ready for us to bring it into Unity. So I think they look fine, and then what I decide to do is move on. So here we go, I've moved them all in, I've gone over to Unity, and I start bringing in the trees. Like I said, I didn't really know what I wanted for the terrain for this game 100%. Originally I wanted it as a just straightforward terrain, but I just don't think it would look very nice. I wanted it to be more unique. So what I do is I start bringing in all the trees, and I plan on changing the ground to a low texture, low poly texture, just a straightforward texture that I can just change easily, and it'll just kind of blend in with this low poly feel. But I planned on doing that when I put all these trees in, and as you can see, I didn't really like it that much. Moving all these trees in, I start playing around with the size and then rotating them all, and adding in obviously a new material, like I said, for the ground. I started removing some trees between the footage clip. I deleted quite a few trees as well. And here you go. You can see me now getting rid of the terrain and the terrain data, and then I create basically a cube, or I go to create a cube, which is just going to be a standard plane, and then I kind of wanted them to like overlap and like be really unique and like have these edges. I thought it'd be really interesting at first, and so as you can see here, I start getting rid of all the trees just to because I didn't really like the positioning, and then I wanted a really like chaotic scene, chaotic environment, and I tried my best to make it look like an environment that was really, I guess I wanted it to be unique, but then in terms of trying to make it unique, I ended up making it look like shoddy and pretty poor. And at this point I was kind of just desperate to try and get some of the game done, because I didn't want to spend long on the terrain, and in the end I think I ended up spending a very long time, a couple of hours, just trying to work on different terrain. And I've cut most of that footage out, of course, because it's just unbearable for me to be testing all this stuff out. But as you can see, I didn't like it, so then I decided to change the rotation of them and flatten them, and I kind of liked this better. So I extended the water texture. Like I said, that's from the standard assets, that'll be deleted later. All the standard assets will, because I wanted to try and keep this game just everything that I made. So as you can see, this is what I ended up with for quite a few hours of testing and playing around, and I've cut most of it out, like I said. As you can see, I ended up with this kind of flat terrain, blockiness with sharp edges, and I didn't really like it that much, so I went for a less chaotic pattern and went for a more flat and ordered pattern for the terrain. So as you saw there very quickly. I also created a script for random spawning trees for the terrain, and then I also created a random script for size and rotation, which I did in my last game in the Turtle Trial, so you can check that out. I had videos dedicated to those two scripts. And like I said, a quick spawning tree, which really wasn't that advanced or anything. I was just trying to get some code down just to try and populate. And then I create a bunch of tree spawners, create them in a line just to see what I think of it, and then start populating my scene. This is a really lousy way of doing it, it's really poor. I just wanted to see what it looked like contrasting with the colour of the terrain and the blockiness of the terrain. So I planned on deleting most of these trees anyway, and having maybe a better generation system. So there you go, I deleted the trees once I saw how it looked, and again I didn't really like how things were. At this point I was getting very frustrated with the terrain. I'd spent a long time, so I decided to give myself a break. So I had like half an hour to 40 minutes break to try and think about what I wanted, and decided to go for a completely different terrain. So I went back into Blender, as you can see, and I decided to make some platforms instead. This way I could kind of suit to the more low poly feel without it being too blocky, and I figured this was the only way to really make the level look nice with the style of trees and the kind of environment I'll be going for. So as you can see, I'm quickly making a platform, speeding ahead, and like I said, I still remember, I still love doing like these little models, but I would like to spend time maybe making something more better, more advanced and detailed, but there's just not enough, I just don't have the time to really work on it. Maybe I'll try and find time in the future, but as you can see, everything looks fine. Yeah, the jump from Maya to Blender really isn't that severe, it's not horrific, so I can easily adapt to Blender very quickly. So as you can see, I'm going ahead and I'm making a bunch of objects, which is specifically for the platform, and this is going to be the base for the dirt, in case I don't have a surface layer for grass. So as you can see, just creating the platform, smoothing it out a little bit so that it's not too blocky, because that's one of the reasons I didn't like it. And here we go, got a basic object. Then what I decide to do is, once I've tried to even it out and make it, like I said, I really didn't want it to be too blocky, otherwise it would just be too much. I give it basically a really basic material for dirt, for soil, so basically a brown. And then I get rid of the roughness, increase the roughness to 100 so that it's not, so it looks more like dirt. And then what I do is I create a separate object for grass. The reason why I want to do this is in case that I have models where I want the platform to just be dirt only. And what I do is I lay this on top so that I can easily just when I import it into Unity, I can always just put it on top of platforms and maybe make a prefab of it. So that way I'll have maybe two prefabs, one with dirt, one with grass. So there we go, I'm skipping ahead, so that's the other object like I was just talking about, which is the grass. And obviously we've got our platform, which can't remember if I make multiple. I don't think so, I must have made just one, which is fine. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just separating them and then giving a random rotation on them just to try and randomize it a little bit, but not too much. So this is pretty much what I did with the trees anyway. So here what I'm doing is, obviously when you populate a world you need something more than just, especially if it's just terrain with like vegetation, you obviously need something like rocks. So I'm going to have the platforms of trees, and then I wanted to bring in some rocks that match the design of this low poly feel. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a bunch of objects that are going to be basically rocks. Yeah, it was nice to do a 3D game for a change, and to try and work with Blender, which I just haven't had much time to work with Blender at all. Once I finished uni, I did look at Blender a couple of times, but I just have not had time to really go into it. Like I said, I still had Maya on my mind, and even now I can still remember how to use Maya, so it wasn't that huge of a leap to come over to Blender, even now. So I can see, create a bunch of different sizes, different shapes for the rocks, and then give them a specific material, and then obviously have them with the shader just to see what it looks like. It looks quite nice, I think it looks pretty good, and so we add all of our different items. Okay, so obviously we have our old terrain, which I deleted straight away because like I said, very unhappy with it. And then I created an object. Obviously I brought in the object first, which I shouldn't have done. This is just a basic mesh. What I should have done is obviously create the object first. So as you can see, I've added in our random rotation, random size, which I was going to have on our island. So here I create an empty game object with the scripts, and then I put the mesh into our object ready for me to use. I also have a tree spawner on there, which I think I do get rid of. As you can see, there we go. I've got all our trees in now, basic trees with spawners and our island, just to see what it looks like. There's a lot of trial and error kind of with this, and me just playing around with things, especially on day 2, just to see how the terrain was really the focus of day 2, because I really wanted to stylize it differently to how I've done in previous games, and because I wasn't sure how well it would look, that's why I focused on it only on day 2. So as you can see, this time I decided to manually put the trees down just so I can control it a little better, and obviously break something, because like I said, I've made the rotation and size script similar to how I did it in 2D. Obviously I came up with a bug there because I didn't take in the third axis, so that was a quick fix. I did in the third axis to the code, quick fix, just a quick oversight, a quick issue I missed. And there you go. I added the rotation and the random size to the trees, and then gave them and then set the specific variables so they would work. And there you go. Set them all. Obviously, create some prefabs. Just so I can easily use them and quickly bring them into the scene. And like I said, there was a lot of playing around with how I wanted this scene, so that you'll see a lot of me deleting objects and re-porting them. Like I said, I've cut most of this out, but this was a long day. It ended up being quite a few hours of me. I think in total it was like 6 hours I ended up spending on this, which is far longer than I was originally planning on spending on it. I was only planning on spending a max of 4, maybe 4 and a half maybe. But like I said, I just made so little progress with the previous terrain and the plan for the terrain that it just didn't work. So here we go. I added a island generation, which same thing as the trees. I wanted to just randomly spawn islands in. Again, wasn't really sure how I wanted to do this, how I wanted the generation to work, whether it was just going to be layered and you'd have to jump up, or if I just generate them randomly across the world. So just a lot of experimenting. Did the same thing as the trees, and I've obviously set a random objects to spawn different types of islands. Obviously, I create my own like little method, little function, and then I quickly skip ahead. So that what I'm doing here is adding a range of how far they can spawn in between, away from the center. Like I said, just playing around with it, just kind of thinking about how I was going to do this. So here we go, add it into a for loop, so that it basically has a certain amount that maybe it could spawn to. There we go, so we ended up with a bunch, and then I ended up changing it. So like I said, I ended up changing it back because I was just obviously playing around with different spawn methods and kind of how I was just so unsure of how I wanted the spawning to be, and I really should have. This is obviously completely my fault. I should have planned this a lot better. I had such a clear vision, and then because I didn't like how it was going, as you can see, I've managed to spawn in a bunch of islands there, which was quite interesting, quite unique. Like I said, I should have planned it a little bit better and should have gone with my gut on maybe if I did or didn't like it. I should have really planned it out, but sometimes you can't know if you like something until you've tried it, until you've actually tried it. It's exactly why I did it on the second day. So I increased the range I could see with the camera. So here I changed the position of the camera behind the player, and I started realising that I really don't like the third person controller that much and how I've done it. So as I said, I start changing a bunch of things with the third person controller and how it controls a little bit, and then change the ascend and descend and get rid of it for now. I also add in this one basic island. So again, I've decided not to have random generation because it just was too annoying to get the result that I wanted, and so I decided for something, even another different idea, which was to have multiple islands, have the trees from like we did in the last episode, have the trees on each island, and you just got to jump to each island to grow them. So here you go, I'm just adjusting the trees, what their position, and I'm going to start moving them onto different islands. So now I ended up with, rather than spawn the islands randomly, because I decided to just have them on the water. So here we go, I'm adding in the prefabs for the saplings and the old sapling and the seedling, because I already have the young tree and an adult tree. So I'm bringing them in, creating the prefabs, just like I did with the other one. And having a look at the size, making sure they're alright, and then replacing the inside our tree objects, making sure replacing our old trees, which was the other assets, and deleting them, the standard asset of the tree that we used in our last episode at the end, replacing them, and here we go, I'm testing. So here we go, I claim the tree, see what it looks like. Obviously it's way too big, might be hard to make out at the moment, but as you can see, it is working. Obviously there was a bit of a problem, there was a problem with the tree there, which is to do with the coordinates not being quite correct, the transforms not being set to 0. And then I start changing some of the, I changed the collision for the detection range for me being able to claim the tree, so I increase it, because it was a bit awkward to try and hit, and then I test it out. So we're coming up to the end of the video now. As you can see, I've slowed down the speed back to normal. Ignore the little slidey movement, I'll fix that tomorrow. I'll fix that in the next video, I mean. So as you can see, it's all working, we can claim the tree, we've got our little islands here, and everything is working. So this video was really focusing on the terrain that I did, and not much else in terms of code, apart from like basic spawning, which I ended up not using, and like random size, random rotation, I did end up using that. By the end of the day, I ended up having a much better idea of what I wanted, and I can't remember if it's the next day or the day after, but I decided to go for that idea of jumping from platform to platform, but with more of a unique environment using the assets we have. Well, you'll just have to see. So that'll be it. Next time we'll look at day 3. See you next time.